All right, welcome back to another edition of the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast. I am Brad.
It's your boy Zach.
And I'm Hefe.
Okay, all right. This week is the NFC West. First, we got a couple things we want to tell you. As always, if you're watching this, please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an episode and you don't miss your chance for our jersey giveaway. Check in the comments for updated URLs and our links. We've got a lot of things going on. We're moving some of this into a Patreon page to set up for our patrons, and we're hoping to drop that here in the next couple of weeks. Check in the comments for the links. Follow us at Horsemen Sports on Facebook and on Twitter, so you're in the know, you know what's going on, and you can keep up with us there. So, all right, we ready to get started?
Let's do it. It's going to be a good one.
NFC West. So perhaps the most entertaining simultaneously. This is an odd division last year. This is perhaps the most entertaining and maybe the most disappointing division last year. Four teams that we talked about all year had playoff potential, just beat the hell out of each other. And in the end, they let everyone, including themselves, down. And just the second week of the playoffs, so there just was no more conversation about the NFC West. It was over. Because the sixth seeded Rams beat the third seeded Seahawks wildcard weekend, and then went on to just take up space against the Packers. So I guess the big question for you two is, we should have done a poll. We should do polls and let our listeners pick who we start with first. I'm afraid we may be at odds this week. We usually start with the team that's going to finish last. Who do you guys want to start with?
Who do you have finishing last?
It's a little bit complicated, but I have the Seahawks and the Cardinals tied for last.
What about you, Hefe?
I have the Seahawks last in the NFC West.
So do I. Let's start there.
All right. Last year, 12-4. Pretty good, right? Wrong. That's my Charlie Murphy impersonation. Look, when we run down the schedule for the Seahawks from last year, they beat the Falcons. They beat a Patriots team that never did figure out what the hell they were doing last year. And I think that's resolved. We've talked about that. But last year, game 2 of last year, the Patriots they were damn near, well, I was going to say equal with the Jets, but that's not true. They beat the Cowboys. They beat an early Dolphins team that hadn't gotten their shit together yet either. They beat the Vikings, who never did figure it out. They lost to the Cardinals. They beat the 49ers. I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. All right. They lost to the Bills. We expected that. They lost to the Rams. They beat the Cardinals. They beat the Eagles. Right. They lost to the Giants. They beat the Jets. They beat the Washington football team. They beat the Rams. They beat the 49ers. So you take out the NFC West teams, they didn't beat anybody. You put the NFC West teams back in, they didn't beat anybody. So Pete Carroll can shove that 12-4 right up his ass. They're done. Hopefully this is the beginning of the end of the Pete Carroll era. I can't stand watching that motherfucker chomp his gum like some old-ass waitress in a bad 1970s sitcom. He's just over there. He's gone. I want him gone. The only way the Seahawks don't finish last this year in this division, in my opinion, is if the Cardinals can't get their shit together, which probably isn't going to happen, and if Stafford makes the Rams worse instead of better, which in my opinion, there's a 50-50 shot that will happen. Or Russell Wilson makes an MVP run, which also could very well happen. Russell Wilson is the only piece on this team, in my opinion, that puts them above average and could possibly keep them competitive to some degree in this division. But it's a long season. That is a heavy burden for one man to carry for 17 games and then into the playoffs all the way through to February. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Rams, Seahawks, and the Cardinals are all going to hover right around 8 wins. The Rams might push a little higher, 1 or 2 to 10. The Seahawks might move back to 7. That's very mediocre show for the West, again, in my opinion. And I actually have, when I went through the predictions, I have the Seahawks and the Cardinals both finishing 7-9.
Yeah, so I want to hit on your Russell Wilson comment. It's kind of like last year, how it seemed like the first half of the season he was leading the MVP race, but he wasn't able to sustain it. His offensive line just wasn't good enough, and eventually that completely just tapered off, and that's when the Seahawks really started to plummet. Obviously, the record didn't reflect that, but being football knowledgeable people like we were able to see that all season long. So I think that's kind of the same as what's going to happen. Russ can play, but he just can't keep it every single week. And that's a very, very, very tough thing to do. So I'm not putting that on Russ. That's completely on the Seahawks organization as a whole. And even more specifically, the offensive line, which during this offseason, there has been some drama building around that. I think also in the offseason, they have slipped compared to the other teams. Do I think they're still a good team? I do. But unfortunately for them, they've not been able to keep up with everybody else in the division with the moves that the other teams have been making. So, for example, this draft, they only had a whopping 3 picks, a 2nd, 4th, and 6th round pick. Everybody else had multiple picks. So they didn't get better through the draft. They didn't really pick up anybody big on the offseason. They have talent on the roster. They have experience, but as a whole, like I said, I just don't think they could stay consistent enough to outlast the other 3 teams in the division. So if the Seahawks can get their offensive line together, they might surprise me and get into the playoffs. But I have this entire division pretty much cannibalizing themselves. When I was doing the predictions, I just split them all up. So everybody's going to finish 3-3 with each other. But the Hawks, because of the moves they haven't made this offseason compared to the other 3 teams, I have them finishing dead last at 9-8.
That's how I feel too. I don't think they did really anything to get significantly better or really better at all in the offseason. Like Zach said, you go into the draft, you don't have very many draft picks. You're not active in free agency. On the defensive side, they brought in Pierre Desir as corner, and on the depth chart, he's their number 3 corner. And which is unfortunate. He was a Colt a couple years ago, did well with the Colts, but he got torched a lot when he was with the Jets last year. And Pierre Desir got released halfway through the season of a 2-year deal. He had just signed a 2-year contract, pretty good money, and got released halfway through the season. He's not so. They're bringing in guys like that. Carlos Dunlap is a guy on the defensive line that I've always thought should have been out of the Bengals a long time ago, go somewhere and win. But he's on the back 9 in his career, and probably pretty close to the end. He hasn't had the production over the last couple of years that he had in his prime years. And those obviously come earlier for defensive linemen. And because they didn't do anything to get better, I feel like what we're going to see from them this season is going to look a lot like the last half of last season that Zach was just talking about, where they, like he said, the record didn't show it. They still finished 12-4, but there was an obvious drop off in Russell Wilson's play, and that had a lot to do with Chris Carson being injured a lot. Doesn't help that situation. But the offensive line itself, just not good enough. They didn't upgrade the offensive line, really. And even though I like the pieces that Russ has around him, obviously Russ, great quarterback. I like Chris Carson a lot. But Chris Carson has issues staying healthy consistently. If he can stay healthy for an entire year, I like their chances a lot more because he changes the game for him. They have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. But after that, who do they have? If one of those guys goes down, which is a very real possibility, you're not going to keep both of them healthy every year, all year long. So, I don't like the way the roster's set up. Jamal Adams, he's a beast, but he's supposed to be your safety, and he was your best pass rusher in 2020. And I don't really see that changing at all for the Seahawks. So I also have them having a losing record, going 7-10, and finishing last in their division.
Oh wow.
Okay, so I want to go back over something that I said in an emotional rant. I don't think Pete Carroll is in any danger of getting fired, no matter what happens. I say that. I mean, the guy wins 2 games; it's probably over. But I don't see that happening. Because when you look at Pete Carroll's records, they finished first in the NFC West last year, and they shouldn't have. That it was the 49ers division to lose, and anybody that doesn't understand that doesn't know what they're talking about. I'll argue that every day. We're going to talk about the 49ers, and we talked about all year last year of what the problem was. So in 2017 they finished second, in 18 they finished second, in 19 they finished second, in 20 they should have finished second, and this year they're probably going to finish third or fourth. We have what appears to be a slowly sinking ship. I think I see the sun setting on the horizon here. I think, despite the numbers, I think the boat has a small hole in the bottom of it, and you can't tell just by looking at it that it's sinking until you really start paying attention. And I would think Wilson would know that, and unless he has loyalty to the city and to the franchise, which happens, he may be an off-season topic next. I just want to bring that up.
No, it's a very real possibility. Absolutely.
Especially with John Snyder. Like I said, I don't like the way this roster is constructed, and that obviously has to do with John Snyder, the GM. And he hasn't been able to get the job done. If you're not bringing in the pieces, especially an offensive line, we as Colts fans saw one of the best quarterbacks to ever come into the NFL retire instead of continue his greatness, even after he was given an O-line because he had taken so much punishment. We've seen Russell Wilson run around the pocket for his life and make magic happen every year since he's been in the league. They have to put the pieces around him. You're not giving him an offensive line, which is what he wants. And now the defense isn't going to be able to stop anybody. So no matter how good Russell Wilson is, kind of like Dak last year, right? Putting up 500 yards a game, but they're losing every game. Like, at some point, the defense is so bad that no matter how good the quarterback is, you can't save them, which is crazy. You know, I never thought it'd be like that, but we're getting to that point where some of these teams are just so bad on defense that the greatness we see from the offense doesn't matter. And I think Russell Wilson sees that. And so I think if he has the option to leave after this year, then I think that'll be it. He's going to go in there, compete this year. He's going to collect his checks, and he's going to be out of there next year. I could easily see that happening.
Well, and if that happens, Carroll's done. That will be the big piece that will eventually that ship will sink. And I don't know if it'd be the next year, or it'd be 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But I do know that there are a lot of teams. There are a lot of teams that would salivate to bring him in, and they could come in and win right away. And even places like Miami, where Tua still is unproven. We're getting ready to talk about the Rams and Stafford, unproven. There might be a potential spot there in New Orleans. I don't know if that's been rectified. New England, I don't know if that's been rectified. So this could be a really hot topic in the offseason. I'm looking forward to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we are in agreement that the Cardinals are next.
Not in agreement, but go ahead.
Wow.
Well, I mean, these 3 teams, either one of them can win, in my opinion. So they're all right there.
Yeah,
so I'll explain all that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'll explain that too. All right, except for the Cardinals. I'm going to start and end with one bold statement. Cliff Kingsbury will be lucky if he has 7 months left as the head coach in the NFL.
That is bold.
The Cardinals are probably going to squander all the amazing talent that you two are getting ready to gush about and fall flat on. I mean, they're stacked. I don't see it happening. Cue the coach's firing pool. I got Kingsbury.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. He's one of those young, high energetic kind of guys, kind of like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. So he kind of just fits right in. But yeah, we'll see if he makes or breaks. But I do like the moves that they made this offseason, bringing in veterans like AJ Green and JJ Watt, both of whom are still out to prove they have quite a bit of gas left in the tank. Last season, like we said, the Cardinals were in the mix up until the last week. And I think it's going to be the same this year, but with their offseason free agency additions and through the draft, picking up linebacker Zaven Collins out of Tulsa in the first round, and who many projected would be a first rounder, and Rondale Moore, the wide receiver out of Purdue. I think the Cardinals definitely got better. I have them finishing 11-6 and ending up as a number 5 seed in the NFC playoffs, finishing second in the division.
You know, I'm conflicted about the Cardinals here. All right, because I don't think Kingsbury is the guy to be able to lead a group of NFL guys to the promised land, right? But you know, he hasn't done great. He hasn't done terrible. He's done about what you would expect from the rosters he's been given. And while I think this team is upgraded compared to last year, I don't think it's enough to warrant, you know, everybody talking about, you know, oh, the Cardinals are going to be a problem for everybody. Like, you know, AJ Green, what have we seen from him over the last few years? It's when he's on the field, it's not the same play, and he hasn't spent a lot of time on the field because he's been getting hurt. You know, he's getting older, he's getting hurt a lot. Now, I do like Christian Kirk a lot. I think Rondale Moore can be fine in the NFL. We'll have to see how that draft pick works out. Kyler Murray, you know, his rushing ability hides a lot of his flaws in terms of passing. He's thrown 10 interceptions each of his first 2 years. Okay, so we're looking at double digit, which the first year, rookie season, you know, you don't hold that against him a whole lot. But second year in the same offense and with a lot of the same pieces around him, you know, he's still throwing the same amount of interceptions. So you have the turnovers, and there's still some inaccuracy that happens with Kyler Murray. I said it last year, you know, you have to fix those kinds of issues. We've seen Josh Allen do it. We've seen Lamar Jackson be able to do it. You've got to be able to stop turning the ball over. You've got to be more accurate and decisive when it matters most. At the end of the season last year for the Cardinals, we saw them have a couple of close games, and Kyler Murray wasn't able to be dialed in at the right time. And so we're going to have to see that transformation from Kyler Murray before I say that they have any chance of being able to win this division, especially with as competitive it's supposed to be, you know. But I do think I've seen a lot of people say JJ Watt is washed. I don't think that's the case. I think he's a game changer for that defense, a defense that was already on the rise. They were getting better and better as the year went on last year. And I think bringing JJ Watt and drafting Zaven Collins and bringing in Malcolm Butler's been up and down since his time with the Patriots with his play. But I think as a second corner, it's a fine option. He might hurt you a couple times, but for the most part, solid player. So I do like this defense. Like I said, the roster is a slight upgrade from last year. In my opinion, not nearly enough to be able to win this division. They got a little bit better protection for Kyler Murray, so that'll help him. Maybe he won't run for his life as much. But still, I see this team going 10-7. I have them going 10-7. I could see them winning 11 games, maybe 12 because of the 17th game. But like I said, 10-7. I do have them in the playoffs, so they're the number 7 seed for me in the playoffs.
Don't forget about DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, always a game changer.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that I have the Cardinals winning about 7 or 8 games, and that's with this division cannibalizing. But I don't think Kingsbury is the guy for this job, and I think they're going backwards, and I think the wheels are going to come off. I think if he wins 8 games, I don't know that he gets fired, but I think if he wins 5 or 6, there's a good possibility that they'll stop the bleeding. So that's where that that ideology comes from. All right. We can now agree that we're going to talk about the Rams. Yes? No?
You talk about whoever you want to talk about.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about the Rams.
All right, go ahead.
All right. I like Sean McVay. Now, if you remember last year, I had said that, I mean, despite liking the guy, that I had said that he hadn't yet proven himself, that his fall from 13-3 to in 2018 to 9-7 in 2019, that I couldn't tell whether he was losing control of what was going on or if it was a fluke, and he was, because all coaches have down years. So it was too early to tell what was going on. And I said I thought last season would be a sign of whether he was legit or it was beginner's luck. And if he rallied from the 9-7 and won the division, and then he's the real deal. And at least his tenure in LA is real. And I think even if his ship sinks in LA, I think McVay will easily find another head coaching job. I think McVay can coach in this league. So I don't want to give that impression under any circumstances that he doesn't belong here. I just don't know if he's losing control of this organization. And once that happens, it's really hard to get it back, no matter who you are. So I don't know if he's lost the magic in this equation. They did improve to 10-6, but it was in the West Division where, we talked about all year. There's so much parity that they just cannibalize each other all year long. I mean, we beat that to death. But the Seahawks overachieved. Kingsbury the Cardinals may be headed backwards. He may be headed for a tailspin. And the 49ers had the worst injury-plagued season luck maybe any team I've ever seen. It just kept coming and kept coming and the Rams still only finished second in the division. So that concerns me. I'm still confused. But my money is on the 49ers. But if McVay can upend that, it may answer the question, though. Honestly, to further complicate things, I don't know whether the Stafford experiment's going to work out or not, at least in the first year. So, then what happens? Do we blame Stafford? Do we blame McVay? I don't really know. That was just a whole lot of words to really say, I don't really know. But I have them around 8 or 9 games, but I think the Rams are very capable of winning a couple more games depending on how this all shakes out.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going to go in a different direction there. I understand your reservations about them, but I'm absolutely excited to see what they are going to do this season. Matthew Stafford is an absolute monster, and he finally has the opportunity to prove himself now that he's with the Rams. And he's definitely an upgrade over Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff's a good quarterback, but Matt Stafford, if he didn't play for the Lions his whole entire career, no doubt he may have a Super Bowl or two.
I cannot argue with that absolutely one bit.
Yeah, so I think Stafford coming in there automatically gives the Rams a leg up in this division. And he has playmakers all around him. Cam Akers is coming into his own. Robert Woods is good. Cooper Kupp's one of the better receivers in the league. You got Deshaun Jackson, who's always a deep threat, even though he's like 50 years old now. And Tyler Higbee's a good tight end. Defensively,
what's wrong with being 50 years old?
Yeah.
I just turned 50 last week. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. Get out there and try to outrun these young cornerbacks.
Bro, I can't even go from the couch to the kitchen without pulling my hamstring.
Oh, I feel you on that. But yeah, so they have playmakers on the offensive side for Stafford. I think the Rams offensively are going to do tremendous. And then defensively, you have the 3-time defensive player of the year, Aaron Donald, and probably the best lockdown corner in the game, Jalen Ramsey. So they got it offensively now. They got it defensively. This is definitely a make or break season for Sean McVay and the Rams, because if he can't get it done with this roster, I don't know. I don't know. So this is definitely make or break. I expect them to get the job done in the division. I got them 11-6, same record as the Cardinals, but they'll have the tiebreaker. They're gonna take the NFC West crown, and they're gonna be the number 3 overall seed in the NFC playoffs.
No, I'm not too far off from what you have there, Zach. Because like you, I think the offense here is going to every game is going to be entertaining to watch. Now it's unfortunate that Deshaun Jackson has just always had trouble staying on the field, because injecting him in with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods with Matt Stafford at quarterback, being the gunslinger he is. I mean, when this team is healthy, it's going to be enjoyable to watch on all fronts. Now, the only thing that really concerns me, and it's not much of a concern, but they've lost pieces on the defense over the last couple years. Whether it's the free agency or trades, they've lost some guys, some guys that were key to the Super Bowl run, some guys that have been useful for them over the last couple years since the Super Bowl, and so they're hoping these young guys are going to be able to perform. And I honestly just don't know enough. I didn't watch enough Rams games to know if the young guys that are. I know Taylor Rapp is pretty good. I know Jordan Fuller's pretty good. So you combine that with Jalen Ramsey in the secondary. Now their secondary should be fine. Aaron Donald is always going to cause problems up front and put pressure on the quarterback and tackles for loss in the run game. But Brandon Staley is now the Chargers head coach. He's not there with the Rams. So I'm going to be interested to see how a change in defensive philosophy changes this team. But we've already talked about Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. You have those guys, and you have to assume they're gonna take all these young guys under their wing. And I mean, what better guys to learn from than possibly the best at their position in the entire league. So, with everything adding up together, the only real obstacle I have for the Rams this year is going to be going up against the 49ers. If you look back at McVay versus Shanahan, I believe that the 49ers have won 4 in a row. Even with what happened to the 49ers last year, they were able to pull off wins against the Rams. There's just something in that matchup, Shanahan versus McVay, and they're really good friends. They're like best friends. But Shanahan knows something about McVay that he uses when he goes into those games. So I have the Rams going 14-3, but that's assuming they split the games with the 49ers. If the 49ers do what they've done the last couple of years and win both of those, then the 49ers will win this division. But I do have Matt Stafford finally winning a division in his career and finally getting to the playoffs with an absolutely stacked roster.
Hey,
No, I really like Sean McVay and I like Stafford, and I hope they can turn. That's an interesting stat that you threw out there with Shanahan, because everybody has a monkey that they cannot get off their back. I don't care who you are. There is always a team or a player or a coach that just when you think things are looking your way, something goes wrong and it happens. So maybe that's the key indicator this year. Maybe Stafford it does click and McVay's got the pieces. Maybe they beat Shanahan, and maybe the Rams are in the Super Bowl this year. Who knows?
Yeah, really the only thing that worries me about this entire team is just like I talked about, the defense has lost some key pieces over the last few years. The offensive line that was really, really strong and one of the best when they went to the Super Bowl. Really the only piece that they have left from that team is Andrew Whitworth. I like Rob Havenstein a little bit, but the interior of the line has, in my opinion, gotten weaker. So hopefully the offensive line doesn't cause a bunch of issues for Matt Stafford. I expect this team to run the ball. They're usually pretty balanced under Sean McVay. They like Cam Akers a lot, so I expect them to stay balanced, keep that pressure off of Matthew Stafford. But I think in key situations, if they need the passing game to work, the offensive line could be issues.
Okay. All right, well, let's talk about the 49ers then. I have the 49ers winning this division. I think anyone who's listening has figured that out by now. I hope that Shanahan by now has made the requisite sacrifices to the NFL injury gods in the offseason and that they have been appeased. He had more than his share last year, and I think he'll pull everything together. I've got them right about 12-5. Which I had them losing to the Packers, the Colts, and the Titans, and then picking up 2 losses in the NFC West just because they are interdivision games and freaky stuff happens when that happens. Those are the 5 losses I have for them. But unfortunately for them, even if they beat the Rams and they win the division and they have the 3rd spot, they're still, in my opinion, they're not going to have a better record than Tampa or Green Bay. And I think the highest they can get is 3rd in the playoffs.
Yeah, so if the 49ers can stay healthy this season, they have a very real shot at taking the crown. Like I said, I have the Rams 11-6, the Cardinals 11-6. I have the Niners 10-7. They're a very young team, a very talented team, led by arguably the best tight end in the game in George Kittle and one of the best defensive players in Nick Bosa. So it'll be interesting to see how the 49ers quarterback situation also plays out this season. Will Jimmy G be the starter? Can he stay healthy all season if he is a starter? If Trey Lance is the man, how will he fare being a rookie and probably the most contested division in football? So lots of questions that need answers for me. But for now, because of how injury prone they are last season and because of how uncertain the uncertainty is surrounding the quarterback situation, I have them finishing 10-7, just missing the playoffs. But like I said, they can very easily stay healthy, dominate this division. So it'll be cool to see what happens.
Yeah, and the staying healthy part is what's big here. When I'm going through doing my predictions, I try to assume that what are the records going to be if the stars stay healthy. You have to have the stars stay healthy to be able to win games. So assuming that's able to have it, which doesn't look good, by the way, because on June 9th in mandatory minicamp, they had 2 guys within a 3-play span in practice. One tore his ACL, an offensive lineman, and a safety tore his Achilles. So already the 49ers are starting to get injured.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that.
But, luckily it's not guys that I think they were going to be depending on this year. So, the next man up mentality comes into play here. But assuming that if the stars can stay healthy, then they have the roster to be able to do it. Now, I do think that Trey Lance should be the starter, but I really don't know if it matters because this team runs the ball a lot. So they're taking a lot of pressure off of their quarterback anyways. They have the offensive line to do it. They were able to give Trent Williams a huge deal, which is big time. Alex Mack coming over from the Falcons. He's been one of the best centers in the league for a long time. So they have the pieces to be able to protect the quarterback. They have the pieces to be able to make the run game work the way Kyle Shanahan likes to work it. I'm interested to see how Trey Sermon's going to do coming in behind Raheem Mostert, but they also have Wayne Gallman and they still have Jeff Wilson Jr. Like, we're still going to see this team running 4 guys for 35 times or more every game. But I do of course, I'm a huge George Kittle fan. I had him in pretty much every fantasy league that I drafted in last year. So I do think he's top tier, not just tight end, but top tier pass catcher in the NFL. And Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are 2 guys that I really like a lot. I think they're both dynamic pass catchers. They just need to be able to stay healthy. Again, we're talking about the health. That's a huge thing with this team for obvious reasons because 2020 was just so crazy. But I really, really like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk as a 1-2 punch, and George Kittle at tight end. I think this offense can be really, really special. And I think Trey Lance has the ability to take it to that next level. And I don't know when it'll happen, but I think at some point this season, Jimmy Garoppolo, whether he gets hurt again, which is very probable, and what I think is going to happen, or he just doesn't play up to par, I think Trey Lance is the guy that takes the 49ers to the next level because the defense, again, if they stay healthy, can be a top 10 defense. I mean, with all their injury woes last year, they were still a top 10 defense. So I expect the defense to still stay at the top of the league. I expect the offense to be at the top of the league. This is going to be a very dangerous team this year. And Kyle Shanahan just has to not mess it up when it matters most. We've seen him do it multiple times. You can't mess it up when it matters most. So, but because of that is the reason I have them going 1-1 against the Rams this year, which is going to lose them the division. Like I said, I had the Rams finishing 14-3 and going 4-2 in the division. I have the 49ers going 13-4 and going 4-2 in the division, finishing second. Now, of course, they obviously make the playoffs in this situation, so that gives me 3 teams from the NFC West making it into the playoffs this year.
Interesting.
Well, I just want to remind you both that we had that same conversation this time last year, and well, I guess we did have 3 teams make it in, but they just had cannibalized so much. There just wasn't anything left. They just disappeared, which is why I said it was the most entertaining and the most disappointing all year. Anyway, let's not beat that to death. It looks like this is going to again be another entertaining division, watching the way this plays out, because so many different things could happen. I could have been completely wrong about the Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks. So I'm excited to watch this division, see how this plays out. And it would be really cool to see the 49ers and the Rams have really strong records and both get in the playoffs and go deep, meet each other in the divisional round or maybe even the NFC champion, which I don't see that happening. But anyway, anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, hopefully the NFC West, hopefully we're overhyping it again. I hope we're overhyping it again because the Colts have to play the entire NFC West this year. So hopefully they kind of suck.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that does it for today. But we want to remind you again, we've got a lot of stuff coming up. We're moving Patreon. We got the fantasy stuff coming up. The Pick'em League's coming up. You need to follow us on social media so you're not missing what's going on. And every episode, check the links. Share the episodes with your buddies. Help us get the word out. Even your grandma, if you still haven't. I told you last week to share it with your grandma, and if you haven't done that, you need to do that too. Just show us some love. Help us get support. We appreciate it. And camp opens this week, right?
Do believe so.
Yeah, quarterbacks and rookies start showing up later this week and this weekend, and then it's pretty much full-fledged football coming up for us. Well, we got 8 weeks, right? 9 weeks?
Something 50. Quick question real quick. Does Aaron Rodgers show up to training camp?
Yes.
Yes, I actually just read something last night right before I went to bed that said there was some lady that cleans a lot of the houses for Packers guys when they're gone for 2 to 6 months. Nobody's just going to stay in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So when they come back and they're getting their house clean, Aaron Rodgers was on the list for a deep clean, having his house cleaned. There are other reports that Aaron is planning on coming back, which kind of changed everything. I had them only winning like 4 games this year because I didn't think Aaron was going to be there. I thought if he was playing this year, it's going to be for somebody else. But looks like he's going to come back for his last season in Green Bay.
Isn't it crazy how this whole off season, all anybody has talked about is whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to show up and he's going to be there. And everybody's been trying to find their sources and try to get people to slip up and give them some information. And out of everybody in the whole insider game, it's a cleaning lady that breaks the news.
Yeah, no kidding.
They're always
shout out to her.
It's always those kind of people, man, that they have their finger on the pulse and they hear everything. They know what's going on.
Shout out to the cleaning lady.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Rodgers is still in Green Bay, but I don't expect him to turn his back on a whole season, especially with as close as they were last year. And they have the potential to win a Super Bowl, which is all anybody wants to do. but I'd be shocked if he's there next year.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you want to know what I think happened in this situation? So I think he was fully fine with either not playing or playing for somebody else this year. But I think his relationship with Devontae Adams, as long as they've been together and they've worked together and as close as they've gotten, this is going to be very, very likely to be Devontae Adams' last season with the Green Bay Packers. His last season under contract. If Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be there, why would Devontae Adams stay? Who wants Jordan Love as a quarterback, right? So I would expect that it went down where these guys caught up at some point over the last couple of weeks with training camp coming up. They were sitting there talking, and they decided, all right, this is going to be our last run. Let's just push through it with this team, because I think this team with Aaron Rodgers can be special, but Aaron Rodgers is a big piece of it. So I think people should probably be thanking Devontae Adams, because behind the scenes, I think he had a lot to do with that.
That makes a lot of sense, and it also makes a lot of sense. Aaron Rodgers is egotistical, right? You don't play at that level and not be. It just doesn't happen. Rodgers may have a little bit of envy. Not envy's not the word. I would say admiration for the Brady effect. Rodgers comes back and they win this division. They lose 2 or 3 games and they roll and they win a Super Bowl, and he walks out of there. And that ship sinks.
Oh yeah,
it says everything it needs to say. He made a statement right there, and don't tell me that's not on that guy's mind. So, but with Rodgers in Green Bay, they are, in my opinion, I pushed back against you last year, Zach. I'm fully on board. They are one of the top 3 or 4 teams to win the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go. Oh, but everybody needs to be on notice. You probably ought to sell your Rodgers jerseys on eBay in December or January, because they're probably not going to be worth anything in March.
Yeah, get the value while you can.
Get the value while you can. So, all right. Facebook, Twitter, Horsemen Sports, horsemansports.com. Pretty soon we're going to have the Patreon page set up that's going to go there. And check us out next week. We'll be back. And next week is the AFC West.
Oh, yeah.
Another cannibalizing division.
Oh, yeah. Well, except for one team, but
yeah. Well, we're not gonna tip our hat and talk about which Chargers team you're talking about. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Deuces.
See you.